wasn't a bad run. Leader Fan Radio Network.
That's all. I'm done.
And KFAN.com. 1 minute, 52 seconds past the hour of 3 o'clock. That's Central Standard Time. Welcome back. It is a Friday edition, a Friday Football Beast edition of the Bumper to Bumper program on a calm before the ice NAMI Friday afternoon here in the Twin Cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul. I host the program. My name is Dan Barreiro, I before E, except in Barreiro, former Ink Stain Wretch, newspaper of the Twin Cities. Before that, Dallas Morning News, Bermuda Shorts. Before that, the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Actually, when I was there, I just wrote for the Constitution. Then they kind of merged. I don't even know what's left of either paper at this point. And before that, another now defunct newspaper, the Louisville Times. The Louisville, Kentucky Times. And before that, of course, Indiana Daily Dissident, as the General, Robert Montgomery Knight, used to call it. Guardsy's the producer of the program. Took me 5 years to get out of college. Took him 5 colleges to still not get out of college. It's an interesting thing how that works.
You are a good writer. With a turn of a phrase like that, that's great stuff.
Well, it's all true.
Yeah.
But I welcome you back to
I wasn't there as many years as you.
No, that's true.
In total.
That's very, very true. Davey.
More colleges.
And in fairness to myself, I did graduate in 4, but then I hung around to start graduate work that I never completed. Should I go back to get that master's degree? And would any of the classes I took, because all I lacked, Bozich and I were both in the same track, all we lacked was one business course and the master's dissertation. Do you think the other courses that we both took, now this goes back to 1978, they'd still give us full credit, or they'd say, well, that's almost 50 years ago, man. Well, no, you're going to have to start over.
I would think they'd find a way for you guys.
That'd be good, wouldn't it?
I think they would.
That would be outstanding.
What would you use your graduate degree for?
No clue. Other than the idea of just getting it done.
Just finishing the race?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I could go with the cliche about I promised my mom that I'd finish my master's degree, but I never did.
You didn't
to be honest
do that?
with you. No,
so you're
I
not
can't
living
say
with that guilt?
I don't think I have that kind of guilt. No, I really don't. We are delighted you are along for the ride today. At some point in the 3 o'clock hour, we will get to predictions. Might be a little later than usual because we're expecting the chance to chat with Riverboat Ron, as in Riverboat Ron Rivera, former National Football League head coach, couple of stops, and a former member, of course, of the 1985 Monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. He's being made available to us because of the Army-Navy weekend that Glenn Mason said he is attending. He's already sent us video.
My God.
About his hotel suite that he's staying in. You can't even make it up.
No.
More on that later. But Rivera apparently has an Army-Navy connection, and that's part of the reason he's being made available. And we'll look forward to catching up with him on a number of fronts. Always been a very engaging man, very good coach, and a damn good football player as well. So we hope to get to Rivera, we were told, somewhere around 3:30-ish. That's the plan for now. Ben Gessling has been moved from his Friday regular slot to Monday at 4:30. We're, of course, facing a 2-hour show between 3 and 5 on Monday because the Vikings are hosting Monday Night Football against Rivera's Monsters of the Midway, the Chicago Bears. And Lavelle is scheduled for a 5:30, his usual 5:30 appearance on the program as well. So is the run over? I guess that's the question today it's Friday the 13th, they tell me. Now, I don't think you're particularly superstitious, but a lot of people are. And they're wondering whether this might signal that the last 24 hours might signal the death knell for your favorite hockey team, the Minnesota Wild, the team that should be called the Northern Lights.
Off one loss to the Oilers, we're ringing the bell?
We're you saw the update today, right? It's worst case. It sounds like worst case scenario
for Middleton,
on your guy, Jake Middleton.
For Midzi,
who's been brilliant this year, part of our top defensive duo right now. And it appears we're talking about a broken hand, or I should say broken finger on his right hand. This was very early against the Oilers, who humiliated us last night What was the final last night? 7-1?
Something like that.
Just for fun. Middleton, it's now official, has been placed, as many of you may know, but some might not, long-term injury reserve.
The dreaded LTIR.
That's the worst. He's got to miss at least 10 games and 24 days as a result. And we've already plucked your guy, Travis Dermott, off of waivers. He was most recently with the Edmonton Oilers. He's 27, 16 goals, 62 points, plus 12 in 339 career games over 8 seasons. Toronto, Vancouver, Arizona, and the Houston Oilers. No points, -3 in 10 games this season. Russo tells us. I bring up Russo's name because if there are people out there thinking that this is it, it was a nice run, best record in hockey, great first month and change of the season, but that it might be over. Well, there's the obvious concern that the injuries are just going to start. They're stacking up. Now, a couple people I think are close to coming back, but the fact is, probably our worst loss of the season yesterday. And Russo, being the hockey historian that he is, and one could say the alarmist in my category, he reminds us that today, Friday the 13th, is the 13th anniversary of an infamous 2011 Minnesota Wild loss in Winnipeg. That was a game in which your guy, Pierre-Marc Bouchard, remember him?
Booch.
Got hurt, got cheap-shotted. That started a string of Wild injuries.
It's frustrating.
That triggered an 8-game losing streak for the team that, wait for it, had the best record in hockey at the time.
But you know what?
What happened the rest of that season? Well, the hardcore Wild fans will know. Minnesota won 15 of its remaining, I should say, 52 games, and missed the playoffs entirely.
Yeah, it's frustrating.
I'm just saying, last night, team with the best record in the league gets humiliated 7-1, loses its top pair defenseman, Jake Middleton, to now a significant enough injury that we got to go, as you say, with the proverbial dreaded LTIR. In his case, we've already got a bunch of other injuries. This is how hard your guy Russo, this is how hard he played it. He noted that when this happened 13 years ago, we had just played, what were the two locations? I think it was Arizona. There was 2 Western teams.
Yeah.
We'd been on a trip.
Right.
And guess what? We just played those same 2 teams. Now, one of them has moved from Arizona to Utah.
Yes.
It's the same team.
I did notice that.
I mean, Russo is milking it and playing it for all that it's worth. Is he being a little alarmist? I think so, but by the same token, history's history.
Yeah.
What he wrote is accurate, and of course, that would be a worst case scenario, would it not? That we'll look back on this game last night as when everything turned in that direction, where we're left with nothing left to say, but it wasn't a bad run.
It's called getting ahead of it, I think.
Think so?
Getting ahead of the storm in the journalism field. I didn't watch the game last night. I think it was on ESPN Plus, and I wasn't in the mood. By the time I was in the mood to find ESPN Plus,
yes,
the stream, they were already down, I think, 4-1. Swedberg had already given up on the club via Twitter. He said, I'm going to bed. I'm not going to watch us get humiliated on national television. Enough is enough. I went to sleep. I woke up. And as usual, you wake up and you go through your morning routine. I start talking to people and reading some things. And I read Russo's piece, and I look at my 10-year-old and say, how long was Daddy sleeping? Last night, we were the best team in hockey, and now we're going back to 2011, and this might be a sign of things to come, that it's all about to come crashing down. How long was I asleep? Like a month, and we're mired in a month-long losing streak? Or did I just sleep through one night? Because that was alarmist.
It always starts somewhere.
It does.
Now, the injury part, we're kidding on the question of the Wild are now done. Obviously, calm down. We've got, again, we were reminded of it yesterday. We're getting it again today. The level of defensiveness among very literal Minnesota Wild hockey fans that listen to this show is remarkable. Honest to God, you guys need to calm down. You really do. We're playing. On the other hand, the injuries aren't helpful.
No.
And here's another example of the unfortunate game that the hockey community, I guess, is desperate enough to have to play almost every time. Dan, this is hockey. He'll be back playing with a broken finger in no time. This isn't your baby association where they willingly take days off for no reason. Boom. Get it?
Roasted.
Now, I'll say again, on the basis of what the LTIR rules are, he's got to be out 10 games is a decent number of games. I don't think you can go back on the LTIR, can you? I don't think you can get off early.
I don't think you can.
I think that's the whole reason you got to be very judicious about when you use it. And if you do use it, the assumption is, well, that's the minimum this is going to take. Right?
I think that's almost 10% of the season.
Well, yeah.
Don't quote my math.
Don't hold him on that.
But it seems like it's right around that.
But honestly, this isn't to savage the club. It's to say it is unfortunate that as well as they've played, they've hit another stretch where they seem to be getting pounded almost. And this was like almost from the get-go. Right? Wasn't this almost the opening minutes of the game?
Yeah, the injury. I think it was the first 37 seconds.
And he was going to be part of our master plan to torture McDavid, right, as well. Didn't feel like we tortured anybody last night, being edged.
The
final
audience.
Score was 7-1. Yeah, the audience.
The audience felt tortured.
100% right. Let's get a pause in here, try to stay somewhat on schedule. I mentioned the outstanding guest lineup today. There will be plenty of Vikings conversation before we're done, maybe even a little when we... Hockey community can be mad at me all they want. Here's a Russo tweet from 4 hours ago. Minnesota Wild must make sure 2011 doesn't repeat itself after ugly loss. The injuries keep coming for the Wild, who lost Jake Middleton to finger/hand injuries that I hear will cause him to miss significant time. Wild may need a D today, and then it links to a column. So don't shoot the messenger. I'm quoting the hockey reporter extraordinaire. And I do think he's enjoying the Friday the 13th aspect to this as well. And for the record, it's just factual. The last time we were tops in the NHL, record-wise, this late in the season, was mid-December 2011.
Excuse me?
The aforementioned nightmare when in Winnipeg, where we lost Pierre-Marc Bouchard, and then won 15 of our final 52 games. Now, I looked it up. I shouldn't have to as the ambassador, but just to be sure, I looked it up, and Kirill Kaprizov was not a member of that team.
No, he wasn't.
And
he would have been like 11.
Relatively healthy now, we think. That, of course, would be the death knell. Right? Obviously, if Kaprizov goes down, we were worried a couple of weeks ago. Right?
Yeah, when he left for a minute.
So, no, there's a lot of reasons to think that it ain't going to go quite the way it did back then, that we should be better able to withstand the savagery, the negativity. We've got our this was a 5-game homestand, wasn't it? That began
I think that's true.
With last night.
Yep.
So there should be some opportunities there. As well. So
starting tomorrow against Philly, who's just okay. And then Vegas comes here Sunday. They're very good.
And look, Edmonton's been red hot, right?
They have since we beat them.
Since we beat them, I think they've won 6 out of 7. So that needs to be factored into the discussion. But we didn't play. It was a clunker. It may have been our worst game of the year, is what
schedule loss.
Yeah, there were some people who went with that.
Including Russo.
Yeah. Which
he didn't really, but...
No, but he
and it wasn't a back-to-back.
No, it wasn't. It was just a return home from the end of the trip.
Yes.
But there was a day in between. NBA schedule loss, isn't it, next night?
It is. Yes, with travel involved specifically.
You apparently flunked math again.
What do you mean?
Well, 10 games would be 12%. You said 10 games was 10%.
You know what I was thinking? 8 games. That's why I was thinking 10%. I said it's about 10%. 10 is about 12.
Yeah, but 12 is more.
12 is more. You're right.
I'm just saying,
it helps when I write things down. When I have to do things in my head, it doesn't go well.
Does it feel less like a Friday football beast when the game is Monday night. It kind of does for me because we're going to have a whole nother show. I think we make the Monday show the Beast, don't you? Because that's the day of the game.
Yeah.
And so we're definitely going to talk plenty of football here. But I think before we're done, certainly, it doesn't feel as beasty to me, though, when we're not previewing a Sunday game. And by the way, there are some really good Sunday matchups that have some implications, obviously, for the Vikings. Not so much new. I think I saw the noon slate, and it was awful. A lot of clunkers. But then the 3 o'clock or 3:25 window, Central Time, there's some damn nice matchups. Most notably, Buffalo at Detroit, right? A game that has significant and obvious implications for your favorite football team, the Minnesota Vikings. So it may well, it's not crazy to think that when the Vikings take the field Sunday night after our show, that the Vikings will be playing for a share of first place if they can knock off the Monsters of Midway.
That would be crazy.
I don't think it's crazy.
Yeah, I agree.
The Lions are very good, but the Lions have had some close shaves lately, have they not?
A lot of them.
And Buffalo's a legitimate opponent. They haven't been road warriors this year, but they've got some weaponry to them. And everybody's talked about the fact that as much as we like to whine about injuries, including with the Minnesota Wild, no single part of any team has been decimated to the degree that the Detroit defense has. Don't they have like 9 guys out? It's absurd.
Just on defense,
I think. That's what I said.
Yeah.
And they keep finding a way. I mean, basically what they've admitted before this last game, who did they beat in a shootout in the last game?
The Lions?
Yeah.
Let me pull it up because I don't remember off the top of my head. I should
remember it. It was another shootout. And before the game, the message that was conveyed to Goff was, we may need you to win the shootout.
The Packer game on the Thursday night?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, 34-31.
We might need you to do exactly that because we're, I know, next man up, cliche and all that stuff, but there's limitations to what we can expect from this defense given the number of people who have been missing. I mentioned this stat on a lot of Vikings conversation on Enough Said tonight. And by the way, we're at the regular times. 7:30 on the Plus and 9:30 on Fox 9. They ran out of sporting events to preempt us, apparently. We kind of have, everybody knows, I think, that our last 3 games, we are playing at Seattle. That game's there, right?
Yes.
Then we are hosting Green Bay, and then we are at Detroit, correct?
Yes.
That's the game where Vikings hope they're playing for the division crown. Combined record of those 3 teams that the Vikings are finishing the season with is 29-10. That's slightly better than the record of the teams we've played in the previous 7 games, including the Bears game Monday night, 28-50. 28-50. Now, again, I'm not holding that against the Vikings. It's not their fault. It's just the way the schedule worked. We said all along that there was a soft, chewy part of the schedule if you could just get to it. And they more than got to it. They got to it with an outstanding record, and they have taken, full advantage. They have won 6 in a row for Mike Yo. But we'll probably know a lot more about the club collectively, maybe even about the Darnold dilemma individually, depending on how things play out down the stretch. I will tell you, I know pick segment is coming up in a while. That'll be after our conversation we hope to get with Ron Rivera of the Army-Navy weekend. That I see no upset coming Monday night. I'm not going to go loser-proof. People get mad when I do that. I know how weird that Bears game was there, but there's a sneaky aspect to what has changed about the Bears. Yes, the offense has gotten better with the ascension of first a new offensive coordinator, and now he is the head coach of the club. But the defense has gotten worse. Defense was putrid against the 49ers, and I really do think, everybody teams like the Bears look for the adrenaline rush of a new head coach because he's well-liked and he's well-respected. But and I know, man, how this stuff works. once you get past the adrenaline stage, it can be a downer. And I think the Bears are, regardless of who the head coach is, strikingly close to just quitting. So this is another one of those games where you'd like to get on top of them. But I think we're going to be able to score.
I agree.
I really do. I think, because in all honesty, Matt Eberflus is a good defensive coach. He was the defensive signal caller. He's gone. And I don't know who they replaced him with, but he and they looked lost. Who's the 49ers tight end?
George Kittle.
George Kittle looked like a combination of
Mike Ditka, John Mackey,
and you name your third that's a little bit more recent, so we don't sound so ancient. Whoever it is. I mean, he was open like 10. He had like open space for 10 yards every time he caught the ball. So I don't know if that means that's a big day for our tight ends or not, but I think we're going to have a really good day, a night, I should say, offensively. I don't think that's going to be. I just don't think this game is going to be anywhere near as close as the last game ended up, and we know how goofy that game got. Now, might the Bears move it a little bit? Yeah, they might, because teams have been moving it on our defense. They haven't been scoring touchdowns, but they have indeed been moving it. So we'll see how that goes, and we'll save all the permutations for the prediction segment.
The betting line, by the way, agrees with you. The line we're going to go with, the DraftKings line. Yeah. The Vikings are 6.5-point favorites.
Yeah.
That's pretty sizable.
It is sizable, but it tells you something.
They were 5.5 up on the Falcons last week, and we know how that ended.
Yeah,
6.5 is, I dare say, that might be the biggest spread they've had all year. I don't remember one higher than that all season. I might be forgetting something.
No, I think you're right.
Maybe Tennessee, or maybe who else did we play on the road? Tennessee, Jacksonville, probably. Maybe that was a little bit higher, but this one's pretty big. We
will be monitoring. Randy Moss is expected to go live via his Instagram account, I think at 4 Central. And how much detail? The assumption is he's going to talk about whatever illness or conditions he is battling. And we'll certainly pay attention to that, give you some of that later, and react to it depending on what Moss gets into and discusses. JD in Duluth writes, 10 is about 12 is an all-time bumper-to-bumper math liner. 10 is about 12. I think that's a shot at you.
Yeah, I know. I had 8 in my mind. I get the math right, but I get the numbers wrong.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's a problem we both have when it comes to math. There's no question about that. After last week's playoff discussion, I'm wondering if 12 really is more than 10. That's a callback to our difficulty.
Major difficulty.
Figuring out whether a team with 15 victories and no ties would have a better winning percentage than a team with 14 victories and 1 tie. I think, though, we got to the right answer, did we not? We eventually figured the thing out.
Yeah, with some help from the Bradshaw Bryant KFAN text line.
Are we going to get our plucky veteran cornerback in this game?
Let me check the injury report. I'm trying to talk to our boys in D.C.
I understand.
To see what we got here.
I don't think. My guess is he's not likely. I don't think we're gonna. I think we're gonna get him. I like to think they're trying to be cautious to give him another week off because they know what's coming. Seattle's improving. They're hot. We know what Green Bay and Detroit are capable of doing defensively. Correct?
Yes.
All that's true. So we'll keep an eye on the injury list, and we'll have a chance probably to get to that during the prediction segment, which will be a little later than usual because of our time with our next guest. We were expecting pretty much any minute. Lavelle is scheduled for 5:30 today. I may need your help with him because I refused to read his column analyzing the big free agency signing, what it was going to mean for Major League Baseball, because I assumed he was going to use it to excuse any time the Twins do not want to spend any money, that he's going to go with the why bother to spend money when that's the landscape, that's the backdrop. So we may find out about all of that.
Tap dance for like a minute. I got to go to the rack.
We got some. Okay, all right. We're going to get some. Garzi's going to work his gonculator magic to be sure that we got all the right dials pushed. No, buttons pushed and dials. What would be the term? Fine-tuned, so we can have a few minutes with former National Football League head coach Ron Rivera. That's the plan here. and we'll give you what his connection is to the Army-Navy game as well, because that's the bit. Nordo is there, and as we send people there, sometimes yours Guardsy went there. They give us access to some good guests that are affiliated with the game, that they bring in for the game, etc. Mace told us he was going to be there. In fact, he is already, I know, in Washington, D.C. I think this is the first time he's attended Army-Navy. And we do have Mr. Rivera?
I think we do.
There we go. Ron, can you hear us okay?
I got you guys. How you doing?
We're doing very well. It sounds very festive where you are.
It is. It's a celebration of Army-Navy. It's a celebration here at the Women's Museum. I mean, it is really a neat place to be, and I think it's all here to honor the 125th Army-Navy game.
It's funny. We have as a weekly guest now the former Gopher coach, Glenn Mason, who I don't know how well you know him, but obviously had some success here and at Kansas. And he is in. He's in for this weekend for the first time in his entire life to experience the Army-Navy weekend, which people tell me who go to it that there really is not. Even football people say there's really nothing else quite like it.
Well, I know this. When I was with the Philadelphia Eagles under Andy Reid on his original staff, we had an Army-Navy game come to the old vet.
Yeah.
And it was one of the most impressive things I've ever seen. The way they march in and they present themselves. And then the game itself, and then the President of the United States showed up. It was amazing, that when George W. came in, and that was an amazing. It really was. It was cool.
So give us your connection, because I know there's some personal parts to this to the Army-Navy game.
Well, for me, it was my father. My dad served 32 years in the United States Army, and as a family, we traveled the world because of Dad's military service. And, being everywhere from Fort Ord, California, which was our home base, to Fort Lewis, Washington, Fort Meade, Maryland, going to Heidelberg, Germany, going to Fort Gulick, Panama, and then always coming back to Fort Ord when Dad had to deploy to Vietnam. We always found solace in sports. And so watching Army-Navy was a big deal for our family. And it was a big celebration on the Army bases, too. So it's just something we kind of grew with, and we knew what it stood for. And then most recently, this past spring, I had an opportunity to go up to Army-Navy, to West Point, speak to the football team, and spoke to some of the cadets. It's interesting. They asked me to speak on leadership, which I thought was kind of ironic because football leadership is one thing, but you're leading men and women into battle. That's a whole different thing. So I kept thinking to myself, make sure you say something really smart, really wise that they can use.
Yeah, that's well stated. It's funny. You mentioned how much when you're in the military life or a military kid, how much you might have to move around. What does that do to a kid? What do you remember? What's that like? Is it all wonderful? Is it difficult moving around that much? What do you remember?
I always thought it was wonderful. I really did, because I took this right away from it. My best team was my family. My best coaches were my parents, and my best teammates were my brothers. You learned how to adjust, adapt, and make friends very quickly. You learned to assimilate to the community and the culture in the area. And one thing that we always had going for us was we were probably, when we moved onto the base, the 4 best athletes on the base. We were all, that's the way we looked at it. We really did. We were all, terrific athletes. We all played sports. We all played the 3 big sports, football, basketball, and baseball. But we also played tennis. We also boxed. We also played, we did everything. If you went to the youth activities, that's where you would find the 4 boys. We were always involved with something on post having to do with sports.
Former National Football League head coach and outstanding National Football League player Ron Rivera, kind enough to join us from Army-Navy weekend. You mentioned your dad, Vietnam. How did he come back from that experience?
Dad was a career guy, so he was always, he was always okay because he always had a support group around him because he stayed in the Army, and Mom was always there behind him 100%. And we as boys, I know my younger brother and I, we didn't know as much as my older 2 brothers understood. All we knew was Dad was going to war when Dad came back, and that was it. But like I said, he had a 32-year career, and then when he retired, he went to work for the Army. So he stayed in the military Oh yeah, he stayed involved for 48 years, and that was just his life. And yeah, but the whole thing about it was he was always around people that were military folks.
You know, because we talk often on this show about military stuff beyond sports, and I don't have to tell you, you know, that war, a lot of soldiers came back to hostility, man. It's changed a lot since then, but it was in many cases ugly that people took out on individual soldiers the policy, right?
Yep.
So did your dad face any of that? Did he ever talk about that?
Yes, he did. And the biggest thing Dad always knew was he was just doing his duty. He was doing what he signed up for. And that's, I think, the thing that helped Dad understand and get through it was that he did his duty. Okay, that's what he signed up for. And one of the things that, like I said, though, is when you always have this group that have all gone through it as well, and you guys were together, you know, like one of his favorite places to go used to be the American Legion, which was like literally right down the street from their house. And, you know, Dad would go there and he'd commiserate with his guys, and he'd come home, and, you know, Dad just seemed to be Dad. And I could, you know, if he carried it inside, we didn't know. And he seemed to adjust very well. I learned very quickly from him, though. Like I do some public speaking stuff like that, and I was asked to do something for the 101st Airborne at an event one time, and I told my dad I was going to do that, and he said, "Ronnie, the first thing you tell them is welcome home."
No.
And I looked at him kind of funny. He says, "Ronnie, we never had parades, not like they did when came home from World War II." And I thought, wow, okay. So I get up there, first thing I said to the folks and say, "I really do appreciate you inviting me to come speak to you, and I wanted to make sure you all understand, welcome home." And they got up, started cheering, and made me realize and recognize just how important it was to those men and women that they were acknowledged and they were appreciated. And it's something that I've always kind of understood to a degree, because watching how much these folks do for us growing up. I mean, you live on an Army base, and you see, you know, like we were in Panama when Managua, Nicaragua was hit by an earthquake, and my dad's engineering company got shipped up to Managua, Nicaragua to help dig them out. You know, my dad was in Fort Ord, California when there was these tremendous wildfires that were sweeping through Central California, and his engineering group was shipped out to go help put the fires out. I mean, Dad was always seemed to be going somewhere, doing something for somebody else. And we learned that, you know, that's part of who he is. He signed up to serve. And we learned very quickly how important service was. My oldest brother became a police officer, and you know, Steve served that way. And, you know, so I always try to make sure I gave back at some point to the military and made sure they understood that, you know, thank you was still not enough. I wanted to make sure they understood that too. And so for me, and God bless USAA, you know, they backed the NFL Salute to Service program, that they started the Salute to Service Award, and I was one of their award winners, and my dad helped present that to me. And I mean, it was amazing to see how proud he was of that. And so that really has always stuck with me, was just the pride in which he told me that I'd won the award.
So well put, and what a magnificent series of contributions. You mentioned family, but certainly as it's starting with your dad. Can you tell us where specifically, or what his duties, responsibilities were when he was in Vietnam?
He was an engineer attached to a special forces unit, and he worked also with the Vietnamese Army, helped supporting them. And after that, I don't know a lot. I really don't. You know, we recently lost Dad. He passed at 89, and it was amazing to see the number of people that showed up. And a lot of them were soldiers that had worked for him at some point, and a couple of them were that served with him at some point as well. So it was kind of neat to have these men come up to him and say, hey, you know, your dad was special, or, you know, Chief was somebody special. He was a chief warrant officer, and some people called him Chief. So it was just kind of neat to have these folks come up and remember my dad.
It's such a brotherhood. You know, when we have, historically, we had a guy on named Colonel David Hackworth who served, he served late in World War II. He served in the Korean War, served Vietnam War, and we got to know him. I don't even remember how it started, but we'd occasionally have him on military issues. And any time we had him on, we would hear some people who served with him, but some who didn't, but they all felt connected. And they felt so moved that we would have somebody on who kind of represented them. It's such a brotherhood, Ron.
Oh, it's an amazing, thing, and what was really neat too, more so than anything else, was when I started my football career in the NFL. Actually, it started in college. When I started in college and I was an All-American, I had people write me letters saying, hey, if you're Ron Rivera, who's from Fort Ord, California, I served with your dad. Your dad and I were in Vietnam together. Your dad and I were in Panama together. I was stationed in Maryland. And so I would forward those letters to my dad, and my dad would tell me, oh, yeah, reconnecting with these folks has been tremendous, and talking to that guy. It was very cool for me to see these folks, and you just hear stories about Dad when he served.
Yeah, that's amazing. Time is short, and because my original plan was to try to talk some pro football with you, although I much rather, this is far more fascinating, I think, for our audience, because we can talk football pretty much any time, but I will finish with two football items. The first is where you are in your career, and whether you're eager to get back into it, whether you like, the separation and being away. Where is Ron Rivera in terms of what you want to do next?
Well, you know what I did was after the Super Bowl last year, I got away from it and intentionally got away from it. And for about 6 months, I really didn't focus in or pay attention. I initially had set up some visits to go check out some mini camps and then training camps, and I decided not to. I wanted to just completely get away. And then I started doing the broadcasting stuff that I had signed up for. And I'm doing TV and I'm doing radio, and all of a sudden I'm getting this 10,000-foot view. I'm looking at the game completely different, from a different set of lens. I'm seeing things from different perspectives, and I'm also seeing things that are happening, and I'm seeing trends, and I'm seeing people do things that I've done before. And I thought, wow, he's doing what I've done, and look at the success he's had. So what I am doing is the right thing. I am doing it the right way. And then I see other things go, oh, that's a better way to do what I wanted to do. That makes sense. Now I'm seeing trends. And one of the biggest trends we see right now in football is we're seeing running come back in. Just how important the running backs are. Well, there's a reason why there's a trend like that. Well, because when you look at the defenses, they're playing a lot more of those cover 2 and cover 4s where they're only putting right, and they're only putting 6 or 7 in the box, not 8. So now they're more susceptible to run, so offenses are running. And I've noted that 7 of the 10 best running teams in the league right now are all in the playoffs as of right now. And if you throw in the fact that the running back contributes to that total, they're even better. So there's a lot of interesting things that I've noted. So am I anxious? Yeah, I'd love to get back. If the right opportunity comes back, I'm most certainly going to listen, and if it's the one I want, I'm going to try and get it.
Last item, and this is more personal. When you guys were making your Super Bowl run in '85, I was a newspaper man working out of Dallas, but I was the national NFL writer. Well, if you're the national NFL writer in 1985, guess where you're going to end up a lot? Chicago, because the Bears were the story. So I was there a lot, which worked also well personally for me, because that's where I grew up. And my mom at that point was the year 2 of a 2-year vicious battle with cancer that ultimately took her shortly before you made your Super Bowl run. And I can say from the bottom of my heart, I've told Mike Ditka this when we've had him on before, that for my father, for my father suffering through all of that, seeing his wife dying, your team was the one thing that brought a little bit of relief from the daily drudge of obviously dealing with that cancer. And so I very much thank you for what you guys did for my family in particular and my dad.
Well, I appreciate that. And, it's kind of crazy to think about it, but that's one of the things the military guys say to us every time they see us is, you know what, thank goodness you guys do what you do. Because, man, when we were over in Iraq or we were over in Afghanistan and we could get you on the Armed Forces radio or on Armed Forces television, and it was a great just escape from the realities of where we are right now. So thank you very much.
I thank you, and I could talk to you for an hour, but we're out of time. Hope to do it again. Best of luck in wherever you go. You absolutely deserve another shot in the National Football League. Thanks again, Ron.
Well, I appreciate it, and thank you guys.
Absolutely. That is Ron Rivera, former Chicago Bear, former head coach in Carolina, former head coach in Washington, where obviously it did not end well. And now it looks like he's enjoying a little bit of his time away. Let's do this. Let's pause, and we'll try to get caught up. We've got a prediction segment coming up, I think, shortly with Carl Gerbschmidt. We've also got Lavelle scheduled to join us about 5. I promise you we will be getting to picks a little later than usual. I think we're going to have a short segment now after we went long with former National Football League head coach Ron Rivera. Gerby, I'm sure, will be cranky because he's put off a little bit, and he's got a very tight schedule. There's a lot, apparently, to get caught up on regarding the PackerFanConnections.com site. Have you been on it lately? There's a whole new...
I kind of like to do it live.
I'm going to try to save the best stuff. But
we've gotten some
a little bit later of what might be going on next. That was a good conversation with Ron. I didn't know him well. I'm sure I talked to him in the group back in '85 and maybe a couple times before. But I'm kind of glad we ended up, given that, again, the backdrop was Army-Navy. I'm actually kind of glad because, deep in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, I'm curious what he thinks about this division right now. Obviously, the top of the division. How does he view the Vikings at this point, et cetera? And I'd still be curious to know what he thinks because he's a guy who I think who's made a pretty seamless transition from football to analysis. And in fact, he's done that before. In Chicago, he's done a lot of radio analysis on, I don't know if he was on the Score or not, but he's had a number of jobs where he's a natural, I think, from that aspect of it.
He was on the Fan last night on Westwood One.
Oh, was he?
So he must have taken a red eye from the West Coast.
Yeah, so there's a lot to get to there, but the background regarding the military, influence in his family, what his father, invested in and apparently stayed in, and obviously how important it has been to the entire Rivera family, I thought was, let's be honest, we can talk, what are the Vikings' chances to advance in the playoffs this year anytime?
What would he do with Darnold?
And what he would do with Darnold, because I'd be curious to know there too. You notice he didn't mind, because he's a meat and potatoes coach. You could tell he doesn't mind bringing up running games back, baby. He kind of liked that, didn't he? You could tell that he was reveling in that fact.
Yes.
Yes.
You think he and Zimmer are in a group chat about the running game?
Yes.
With other running
Very
the ball
possible.
coaches?
Well, here's something to think about. Now, the assumption is his preference would be to be a head coach, but if there's not a head coaching job and Flores gets hired by the Bears, could Ron Rivera be the next defensive coordinator? Could he work with KOC? I bet you could.
Well, if you can't work with KOC, that's a you problem. He's so collaborative. But Ron,
so?
I think he'd slide in nicely if that's what he wanted to do.
I'd like to think that would indeed be the case. Any shot we're going to get Wolf Blitzer later? Is that dream dead?
It seems like the Wolf Blitzer dream has died.
I just wanted that opportunity just to say Wolf Blitzer. It's such a... how many better names are there in the media?
Not many.
Than Wolf Blitzer.
Not very many.
And you know how he started? Inkstein Wretch.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, Jerusalem Post.
All the great ones do, don't they?
Of course they do.
Yeah.
There's no question about it. He's got that newspaper sensibility to him. And he's still on CNN, is he not? I don't know if he's on as much as he used to be, but he's still got a role at CNN.
I think he does.
Especially around the political season,
yes,
for sure.
I think he does.
That would have been nice. What's the Blitzer connection other than Washington, D.C.?
That's the connection. The guy who runs it for us, Jimmy Shapiro, always tries to find local people and convinces a lot of them to come, which I think is very cool. Ron Rivera has no connection to the game other than that he lives in D.C. still from his time as Commanders head coach. Obviously, his dad, which he talked extensively about, but that's pretty cool that he took the time. He's not getting paid by anybody to be there. He's not getting anything out of being there. You can tell
it's important to him.
Yeah, which is great.
952 guy writes, I look forward to your next guest from Wisconsin displaying the same level of grace and humility that Coach Rivera did. It is a tough act to follow.
I know. It's probably good we have a little buffer.
My guess is he'll rip him because
old Bears
he wasn't a Packer and he was an old Bears guy, right? Wouldn't that be enough?
And unlike Bears fans, Packer fans don't live in the past, is what he'll say.
Let's find out.